Dr. Tae Sung's hand snaps out and fists a thick handful of Mary's natural hair. Brutal, deliberate, the grip of a man who has never once been made to answer for his hands. And yanks her backward in the middle of a packed ER like she is nothing. Like 11 years of her excellence means nothing. Like she belongs to him. The entire floor freezes. Every pen, every keyboard, every breath. But behind the glass of Trauma Bay 3, the most dangerous man in the city doesn't freeze. He simply stands up slowly, the way a man stands when the decision has already been made, and all that's left is the execution. And Dr. Taesung has no idea that the woman he just humiliated spent 3 hours tonight keeping that man's soldier alive, or that by morning, he won't have a career, a backer, or a single wall left standing to hide behind. If you've ever been disrespected in a room full of people who said nothing, stay. Because what happens next in this story is for every one of us who ever had to swallow it. Subscribe so you never miss a story, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to say hello to every single one of you. She made one critical error the night she saved his soldier's life. She didn't notice she was being watched. 9:47 p.m. The ambulance bay doors blow open and the gurney comes through hot. 2 stab wounds to the abdomen, blood pressure in free fall. Paramedic's voice stripped down to numbers because there's no time for anything else. No ID on the patient. No name. Just a body that is losing the argument with gravity at an alarming rate, and Mary already has her gloves on before the wheels stop moving. BP's dropping. He's takey at 124. Abdomen's rigid. Second large bore, IV now. Type and cross. Page the attending. She doesn't say please. There's no time for please. She is already inside Trauma Bay 3, already reading the wound, already making the 1,000 small calculations that keep a man's blood inside his body, instead of on the floor. The wound on the left is worse than the entry point suggests. She knows this before the ultrasound confirms it. 12 years of nursing built that knowledge into her hands so deep it lives below thought now. It just moves through her fingers when she needs it. Here is what nobody in that trauma bay knew. The 2 large, silent men who arrived 4 minutes after the ambulance. The ones standing at the edge of the waiting room like they were carved there. Were not family. They were not friends. They were the kind of men who stood in waiting rooms like sentinels because their employer did not leave his people unguarded in unfamiliar territory. And their employer had just walked through the front doors. He came in quietly. That was the first thing. The absence of noise around him, the way the waiting room adjusted without knowing it was adjusting, chairs shifting, eyes dropping, the unconscious animal rearrangement of people in the presence of something their instincts recognized before their brains did. He was escorted past the nurse's station without being stopped, which told its own story, and he took a chair just outside the trauma bay glass without being asked to move or wait or fill out any paperwork. He sat down. He looked through the glass. And he found her immediately. Ji-hoon had come for Daewon. That was the only reason he was here. Because Daewon was bleeding somewhere in this building and Ji-hoon did not leave his people alone. That was the code. That was why men like Daewon gave everything to men like Ji-hoon. But somewhere in the first hour, he stopped watching Daewon. She was talking to his soldier. That was the thing that caught him first. Not her efficiency, not the steadiness of her hands, but the fact that she was speaking to an unconscious man. Not loudly, not performatively. Just quietly, continuously, like she genuinely believed some part of him could hear her. Stay with me. You're doing fine. I've got you. Like keeping a person alive was not just a physical transaction, but something that required the full weight of human presence on both sides of it. Ji-hoon had built an empire on the precise calculation of human worth. He knew, with the cold accuracy of long practice, exactly what each person around him was capable of and what they would do under pressure. He had never once been surprised by a person. She surprised him. 3 hours ago, he walked into this building thinking about one person. Now he cannot stop watching another. And the terrifying part, the part he will not admit until much later, is that he doesn't want to stop. The attending arrived 6 minutes in, assessed for 90 seconds, and deferred to Mary's read, which was the right call, which was also the only call, because Mary had already seen 3 things the attending hadn't noticed yet, and had been managing all of them simultaneously without breaking her voice or her rhythm. For 3 hours, she fought for a man whose name she didn't know. Ji-hoon watched every minute of it. When Daewon's pressure finally stabilized, when the monitors stopped screaming and the attending exhaled and the room shifted from crisis to management, Ji-hoon watched Mary pull off her gloves, check the monitor one final time, and turn toward the door. For 1 second, just one, he saw her face in full. The exhaustion was there. 11 hours of shift written into the set of her jaw, the slight heaviness around her eyes. But underneath it, underneath the tired, was something else. Satisfaction. Not pride exactly. Something quieter. The particular expression of a person who did the thing they were built to do and did it completely, and knows it. She squared her shoulders, put her armor back on, walked back into the chaos. Ji-hoon did not move, did not speak. He simply noted her name badge as she passed the glass. Mary. He filed it away alongside everything else he'd seen in the last 3 hours, in the place where he kept information that was going to matter. He didn't know yet how much. She thought the worst thing that would happen tonight was losing a patient. She was so wrong about what this night had planned for her that it almost breaks something irreplaceable. That was 3 hours ago. Now the ER has gone completely silent, and Mary's hair is still caught in his fist. Tae-sung holds it for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds is long enough to make a point, long enough to ensure every person on this floor, every nurse, every tech, every orderly who has ever had to make themselves small in this man's presence, understands precisely what he thinks of her. Then he releases, drops a thick folder onto the charting desk with a slap that cuts through the silence like a second assault and says, "Next time I ask for a chart, I expect it ready, not whenever it's convenient for you." He walks away, just like that, like he put down a coffee cup. The ER begins, slowly, to remember how to breathe. A keyboard starts again somewhere. A chair shifts. A monitor beeps and nobody looks at it. Nobody looks at Mary either. And somehow, that silence from the people who witnessed it, that careful collective looking away, that practiced institutional blindness, is the part that burns deepest. She picks up the folder, opens it, begins charting. Her hands are steady because she has spent 12 years training them to be steady when the rest of her is coming apart. Right now, the rest of her is coming apart completely. There are 2 hours left on this shift, and she will finish them because that is who she is. She finishes. She has been finishing through things that should have stopped her for her entire career in this building, and tonight will not be the night that changes. Behind the glass of Trauma Bay 3, Ji-hoon has not sat back down. He is standing at the window, watching her chart with those same hands that just fought 3 hours for his soldier, watching her hold herself together with the focused discipline of a woman who has learned that falling apart is a luxury this place will not grant her. His jaw is set. His eyes are on Tae-sung's retreating back. He has already decided. He simply hasn't moved yet. Mary finishes her shift at 2 a.m. She walks to her car on the 3rd level of the parking structure, sits in the driver's seat, both hands on the wheel at 10 and 2, the way you sit when you need to feel like you're still in control of something. And then, alone, in the dark, with no one to be strong for, her body gives her what her mind has been refusing all night. She shakes. Not tears. She holds those back. Because tears feel like giving Tae-sung something he has not earned. But the shaking comes on its own. Involuntary. The body's honest accounting of what 12 years of swallowed dignity actually costs. Her scalp still aches where his fingers were. She drives home with the radio off, in the particular silence of a woman who has made a decision she hasn't named yet. Here's what they don't tell you about hospital power structures. The HR office isn't there to protect the employees. It's there to protect the institution from them. Mary was about to learn this the hard way. The HR office on the 4th floor smells like recycled air and foregone conclusions. Mary arrives at exactly 8 a.m. because she is the kind of woman who is on time even when every instinct she has is telling her to turn the car around. The HR director, thin woman, name badge reads Patrice, eyes that have practiced not seeing things, slides a single sheet of paper across the desk before Mary has finished sitting down. Administrative leave, effective immediately. Reason listed, creating a hostile environment and aggressive behavior toward medical staff. Mary reads it twice, sets it down the way you set down something you are working very hard not to destroy. The security footage, she says. The camera's at the nurse's station. Patrice's gaze goes somewhere past Mary's shoulder. There appears to be a technical issue with that camera. A blind spot in the recording. A blind spot. These things happen with older equipment. The silence between them is not empty. It is full. Full of everything Patrice is not saying. Full of the decision that was clearly made before Mary walked through this door. Full of the particular institutional weight of a building protecting the man it has always protected. Mary has been here before. Not this room, not this paper, but this understanding. The one where the system closes around the person without power, and the person with power walks back into their life like weather. She takes the paper, stands, says nothing. Because there is nothing to say to a woman who has already been told what to decide. She walks to her car for the second time in 8 hours and sits with the paper in her lap, jaw set. Something behind her eyes quietly changing from soft to something that won't go back. Then her phone rings. Unknown number. She stares through 2 full rings, answers anyway. Mary. The voice is low, unhurried. The voice of a man who has never once needed volume to command a room. I need you to listen carefully, and I need you to understand that I am not calling to frighten you. She does not ask who it is. She says, then talk. A pause. She will think about that pause later. The quality of it. Like assessment. Like something that might have been approval. The hospital system deleted the footage from Trauma Bay 3 this morning at 6:14 a.m. My system copied it at 6:09. The voice is even. Factual, like he is reading a weather report about someone else's destruction. 47 seconds, high resolution, every angle. It is on a private server that the hospital's legal team cannot touch. Mary's hand tightens on the phone until her knuckles ache. There is a lawyer. Her name is Odell Marcus. Her retainer has already been paid. You owe me nothing for this. Not yet. What I need from you is simpler. The voice drops a register. I need you to fight. The line goes dead. She sits in the parking lot for a very long time, phone pressed to her ear in the silence after the call, rearranging everything she thought she understood about the last 12 hours. 5 minutes. That's the margin between Tae-sung walking free and the most dangerous man in the city holding the evidence that will end him. 5 minutes, and someone she has never met was already moving on her behalf before she even knew she needed it. She doesn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. She will later realize, both. Mary walked into that office thinking she was about to meet her lawyer. She had no idea she was about to find out exactly what kind of world she'd just stepped into. The building doesn't have a sign out front. The receptionist takes her name, without asking her to spell it. The coffee that appears on the table is exactly right without anyone asking how she takes it. Mary notices all of this. Files all of it. Odell walks in 4 minutes later. A black woman in her late 40s, steel gray suit built around her authority like architecture, the particular gait of someone who has never once entered a room and wondered if she belonged in it. She sets a thin folder on the table, sits down, and looks at Mary, The way people look at someone they have decided to take seriously before the conversation begins. The assault is unambiguous, Odell says. No preamble. The administrative leave documentation, which they issued in writing, which was their first of several critical errors, gives us wrongful termination, hostile work environment, and civil battery. Tae-sung does not have the legal protection he believes he has. She opens the folder. What he has is an institution covering for him, which is more useful to us than a clean record. Before we go further, Mary says, I need to know who is paying for this. Odell looks at her steadily, doesn't hesitate, which means she was expecting it and has already decided on honesty. His name is Ji-hoon Park. A measured pause. He is not someone whose business operates within conventional legal frameworks. Mary waits. He runs the most significant organized crime network in this city, has for 11 years. Odell's voice carries no drama, just precision. He is not a good man by the common definition of that phrase. He is, however, a man who keeps his word, which, in practical terms, makes him more reliable than most clients I've represented who passed every background check. She closes the folder. He watched what happened to you. He made a decision. You are sitting in this office because of that decision. The room is very quiet. Mary thought she was in a legal battle. She was, but she was also standing at the edge of something much larger, and she hadn't seen the full shape of it yet. Mary thinks about the voice on the phone, the steadiness of it, the way it gave her information without dressing it up, without performing reassurance it hadn't earned. She thinks about Patrice's eyes going to the middle distance. She thinks about her name on a piece of paper next to the word aggressive. She thinks about her scalp, still aching. 11 hours later. Can we win? She asks. Yes, Odell says. No qualification, no conditions. Just yes. Delivered with the finality of a woman who does not offer certainty she doesn't possess. Mary nods once. Something in her chest releases. Not relief exactly, but the particular sensation of a decision being made that has been building for a long time. Then let's start. If you've been in a room where a system tried to make you disappear, stay with this story. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to say hello to every single one of you and subscribe, because what happens next is the part they never saw coming. Everyone assumed Tae-sung's fixers were untouchable. That's exactly why it destroyed them when someone touched back, before anyone even knew to ask. Kalen was 23 years old, 11 months at Mercy General, the kind of young man who remembered birthdays and brought food to share, and had, until 48 hours ago, genuinely believed that doing your job with integrity was a kind of protection. He'd been wrong. Mary finds out through the charge nurse, who heard it from the overnight float, who saw two men follow Kalen to his car and was too frightened to tell anyone until the following afternoon. By the time the information reaches Mary, Kalen has called out sick. First time in 11 months, and is not answering his phone. She goes to his apartment without calling ahead. Frightened people have too much time to decide not to answer if you warn them you're coming. He opens the door 3 inches on a chain. Looks like a man who hasn't slept and has been replaying a conversation on loop. Behind his eyes is the specific expression of someone who has been shown in very concrete terms what happens to people who remember the wrong things. They knew where I park, he says, barely above a whisper. They knew about my sister. Mary keeps her face still. Can you describe them? 2 of them. Gray jacket, black jacket. He hesitates. But this morning, there was an envelope under my wiper. No note. Just cash. And a photograph of both of them. His voice drops further. Someone had already photographed them, like they'd been watched the whole time they were watching me, like someone wanted me to know they'd been seen. Mary is quiet for a moment. Where are they now? The number the gray jacket gave me. It's disconnected. They haven't been back. He looks at her through the gap in the door. frightened and confused, and something underneath both of those things that is working its way toward relief. Mary. Who did that? She thinks about 5 minutes. About 6:09 and 6:14. About a voice that said, "I need you to fight," in the tone of a man who had already handled the things that would make fighting possible. "Someone who's watching," she says. "You're okay, Kaylin." She drives back to her apartment and sits at her kitchen table and thinks about the shape of it. The envelope, the photograph, the disconnected number. The men who had been sent to silence a 23-year-old and had instead been silently documented and apparently evaporated before Mary even knew they existed. Ji-hoon had moved on a threat she hadn't seen coming, had neutralized it without announcement, without requiring her awareness, without asking to be thanked. She was not used to that. She had spent her entire career being the person who anticipated the threats and handled them alone, because that was the only option available to her. And now, there was a man, somewhere in this city, who was doing it on her behalf, quietly, completely, like it was simply what needed to happen and he was the person to make it happen. It should have comforted her. It did. A little. It also unsettled her in a way she couldn't fully name yet, because she didn't know the cost of it, and she had learned long ago that everything has a cost. She called Odell. "I need to meet him. In person." A pause. "I'll arrange it." Strategy A. Let the dangerous man stay in the shadows and trust the process. Strategy B. Walk into a midnight alley and demand answers from the most feared man in the city. Mary chose B, and it changed everything. He chose the location, which she expected. What she didn't expect was an actual alley, narrow, rain-misted, overhead lights throwing long broken reflections across wet asphalt, the distant exhale of the city audible from both ends. Not a back room. Not a private restaurant. An alley. The choice of a man who operates in negative space, who is most comfortable in the margins where ordinary accountability doesn't reach. He was already there when she arrived, standing against the far wall, hands loose at his sides, completely still in the way she was beginning to recognize as particular to him. Not passive stillness, not waiting stillness, but the stillness of a man in whom all the motion has already happened internally, and the exterior is simply the aftermath. She walked toward him without slowing, stopped 3 feet away. He was taller than the glass had suggested. There was something about him in person that didn't translate through the trauma bay window, a quality of presence. The way the space around him felt slightly different in texture than the space around other people. His face was composed and unreadable. His eyes were not. "You moved on the men threatening Kaylin before I even knew they'd been sent," she said. "Yes. You've been watching this situation more closely than I consented to." "You haven't consented to anything yet," he said, "which is the problem I'd like to resolve tonight." The mist was light, barely rain, and the alley smelled like wet stone and the ghost of someone's cooking from a vent 3 buildings down. Mary crossed her arms. Not a shield, more like a decision she was physically anchoring herself to. "I need to know what you want," she said, "because I'm standing in the middle of something that was built around me without my input, and I don't operate that way. I don't accept things I don't understand, and I don't owe debts I didn't agree to carry. So tell me plainly, what do you want?" Ji-hoon looked at her for a moment in the particular way he had, the way that felt less like examination and more like recognition, like he was confirming something he already knew rather than learning something new. "I want you to destroy him," he said, completely, in the room where he is most certain he is safe, in front of the high people who have always protected him. "I want you to walk in there and take everything he built and break it while he watches." A pause. "Odell handles the legal architecture. You are the one who has to stand in that room and not flinch. I need to know you'll stand." "That's all?" Her voice was level. "That's the whole ask?" "That's the only thing I need from you." His voice shifted, not softer, but less constructed. The difference between a wall and a door. I don't want gratitude. I don't want obligation. I want to watch the man who put his hands on you lose every single thing he thought made him permanent. His eyes held hers. The rest of what I want, I won't ask you for. The alley held that sentence for a long moment. A car moved across the far end of Linden, its headlights dragging across the wet ground and disappearing. The city breathed around them, indifferent, ongoing. Mary looked at him and read him the way she read everything, carefully, completely, without the comfortable shortcuts of assumption. What she found was not what she had prepared for. Not performance, not strategy, not the careful management of a powerful man moving a piece where he needed it. Just a man saying a true thing in the fewest words it required, because he didn't need to dress truth up to deploy it. That was more disarming than anything else he could have said. "Okay," she said. Something in his face released. Not visible to most people. But she was not most people. A door easing off its pressure. "Okay," he said quietly. She turned and walked back toward the street. Got 5 steps away. Stopped without turning around. The men who threatened Kaylin. Are they going to be a problem again? No. She nodded once. Kept walking. She did not look back. She could feel him watching her go, and for the first time in memory, the awareness of being watched didn't make her want to disappear. It made her walk straighter. Here's what Tae-sung didn't understand about the kind of war Ji-hoon wages. It doesn't look like a war until it's already over. By the time you see it coming, you're already surrounded. 9 days, 2 tracks, no visible connection between them. On the first track, Mary and Odell built the case with the precision of people who understood they would get exactly 1 clean shot and could not afford to miss. The formal complaint filed with the state medical board. 3 nurses deposed, considerably more willing to put their names on paper now that the men in the gray and black jackets had ceased to exist. The administrative leave documentation assembled into a timeline so clean and so damning, it essentially argued itself. Mercy General moved to punish Mary within 14 hours of the assault, before any formal investigation was opened, before any witness statements were taken, before anything except the need to protect the man they had always protected. The 47 seconds sat in Odell's encrypted files like a due charge waiting to be set. On the second track, nothing visible happened at all. Ji-hoon worked the way deep water works. No surface disturbance, enormous force underneath. 2 of Tae-sung's primary financial backers quietly withdrew from his research endowment fundraiser without explanation. A private equity firm that had held a comfortable position in Mercy General's debt structure for 6 years suddenly found the position transferred to a holding company whose ownership was not immediately apparent. Phone calls from Tae-sung's camp to certain board members began receiving longer and longer delays before being returned. None of it was loud. None of it announced itself. It simply happened, the way weather changes. And by the time anyone thought to look for a cause, the landscape had already shifted, that the legal case needed to stand entirely on its own, and it did. What happened in the margins was something else. What happened in the margins was the reason the walls of the hearing room would already be positioned before they walked in. Tae-sung, meanwhile, was performing confidence with the conviction of a man who has never once been given a reason to doubt his own permanence. He appeared at galas. He shook hands. He operated on 3 patients with the serene efficiency of someone who believed the ground beneath him was geological, ancient, and immovable. He was wrong about the ground. He had been wrong about it for 6 days. He just didn't know yet. 11 days ago, Tae-sung walked through that ER like he owned the building. Today, he would find out who actually did. Tuesday morning, the main conference room. 7 board members arranged on one side of the long table with the practiced neutrality of people who have already written the ending and are simply waiting for the narrative to catch up. Tae-sung at the far end with his lawyer. Posture easy, expression calibrated to a man who has never once sat in a room and doubted the direction it would fall. Mary sat across from them with Odell beside her. She wore dark burgundy, her choice, not Odell's, the color she reached for when she needed to feel like herself. Hands flat on the table, face completely still. 12 years of holding herself steady in rooms that didn't want her there, and she had never once been steadier than she was right now. The board chair opened with the language of procedural fairness, stretched like a thin cloth over the shape of a predetermined outcome. Tae-sung's lawyer spoke for 11 minutes. No credible evidence, contradicted record, technical anomaly with the footage. Administrative leave was routine. Then Odell stood up. She connected a small device to the room's projector system with the unhurried ease of a woman who has done this in rooms that frightened other people and been completely unfrightened herself. She looked at the board with the expression of someone who has been waiting, patiently, for exactly this configuration of circumstances. "Before I address the formal complaint," she said, "I'd like to show the room something." 47 seconds. The room watched it in complete silence, timestamp visible, angle unambiguous. Tae-sung's hand in Mary's hair. Brutal, deliberate, utterly unambiguous. Not a gesture that context could soften, not something that alternative framing could recast. Just 47 seconds of a man doing exactly what he had done, recorded by a system he didn't know existed, preserved by a man he hadn't considered. When it ended, the board chair cleared his throat. "Where did this private security system, Trauma Bay 3, copied at 6:09 a.m.?" Odell's voice was conversational. "The hospital's system deleted its copy at 6:14. I also have the deletion logs if the board would like to review them alongside the footage." Tae-sung's composure had not broken. It had reorganized, tightened around a new calculation, the expression of a man revising his model of the situation in real time. His lawyer leaned toward him. He shook his head once. The slight motion of a man who already knows the suggested path won't help. The board chair looked at legal counsel. Legal counsel looked at the table. The silence in the room had the specific quality of a structure that is still standing but is no longer structurally sound. Then Odell said, "I'd like to address the matter of the hospital's outstanding debt." She opened her folder, slid a single document to the center of the table. 6 days ago, Mercy General's primary debt instrument, approximately $41 million in outstanding obligations, was acquired by a holding company. That holding company submitted a formal communication to this board at 8:47 this morning. As a condition of continued favorable debt management, they are requesting the immediate termination of Dr. Tae-sung's privileges and the surrender of his medical license to the state board. The room went completely, structurally still. The board member in the middle, the woman who had maintained careful neutrality all morning, the one whose face had done the least work, picked up the document. Read it. Set it back down with the motion of someone putting down something they have understood and do not want to be holding. "This is irregular," Tae-sung's lawyer started. "It is entirely within the rights of a majority debt holder," Odell said warmly. "I'd encourage the board's legal team to verify that independently. I have time." She sat down. Mary looked at Tae-sung across the table. He was looking at the document. His jaw was set. His eyes were moving. That was the thing. The eyes that had always been so steady in their certainty were moving now, scanning for an exit that the last 6 days had quietly sealed. The God complex requires stable ground. It requires the certainty that the institution will hold. It requires the unexamined confidence that being untouchable is a permanent condition. The ground was gone, had been gone for 6 days. He was only now measuring the distance of the fall. Mary did not feel triumphant. She felt something quieter and more complete than triumph, the sensation of a thing that was wrong being corrected. Not victory, because victory requires an opponent, and she had stopped thinking of this as a fight, somewhere around midnight in a rain-slicked alley. This was simply the truth finally taking up the space it had always been owed. The board chair called a 30-minute recess. He came back in 20. Dr. Tae-sung's hospital privileges were revoked, effective immediately. His medical license was referred to the state board with the hospital's full cooperation, a phrase that had not existed in this building's vocabulary 48 hours ago. Mary's administrative leave was rescinded. A formal written apology, Odell's language, not the hospital's, submitted before they could draft their own softer version, would be issued within 48 hours. Tae-sung stood, buttoned his jacket with hands that were not entirely steady, walked out of the room without looking at anyone. His lawyer followed in the particular silence of someone who knows better than to speak. The board filed out. The room emptied in the careful hush of people who had narrowly avoided something larger than they fully understood. Mary stayed seated for a moment after everyone had gone. Odell was packing files with the efficient calm of a woman for whom this was a Tuesday. "You were right," Mary said. "We won." Odell glanced at her. Something almost warm moved across her face, brief, genuine. "You won. I was the instrument." She snapped her bag closed. He was the architect. The morning air outside Mercy General is cold and clean. October doing what October does best, putting a sharpness in the air that feels less like weather and more like permission. Mary comes through the main doors and stands on the front steps for a moment, just breathing. Behind her through the glass is the ER corridor, the floor that never stops bleeding. The nurse's station where she stood 11 days ago with her scalp aching and a piece of paper in her hand calling her the problem. She is going back. Not today, but soon. Her reinstatement is already in Odell's drafted letter. She will stand at that station again and chart again and hold the chaos together the way she always has. The difference will be invisible to almost everyone and enormous to her. She walks down the front steps and stops. The black SUV is at the curb. Ji-hoon is leaning against the passenger side, one shoulder against the door, hands in his pockets. Dark suit. The particular quality of stillness that she has learned is not absence of motion, but the completion of it. His eyes find her the moment she comes through the doors, with that quality of attention that has never once felt like surveillance. It has always felt like recognition. She walks toward him, stops 1 foot away, closer than the alley, closer than the glass. He looks back. Doesn't fill the silence. She is learning that about him. The way he treats silence as something to inhabit, rather than rush past. The way he lets things land without hurrying toward the next thing. "The dead instrument," she says. "Yes. You owned the ground they were standing on." "I did. The terms are being renegotiated." A pause. Barely there. More favorably. She almost smiles. "You could have told me. You didn't ask. I'm asking now." She holds his gaze. "What do you actually want? Not what you need from me. What do you want?" His eyes move over her face. That careful, complete attention. And underneath the catalog, underneath the assessment, is the thing that has been there since Trauma Bay 3 glass and has not gone anywhere in 11 days. It doesn't have a name yet. He has been filing it away, the way he files everything that is going to matter, waiting until he understood its shape. He understands its shape now. "I already told you in the alley," he says. "You told me what you needed. That's a different thing." The corner of his mouth moves, not quite a smile, but the shape a smile would make if this particular man allowed himself one. "You're right," he says quietly. "It is different." The city is coming back to itself around them, filling with the sounds of a Tuesday morning, indifferent and loud and ongoing. Mary is standing 1 foot from the most dangerous man in this city. She is not unhurried by nature. She has spent 12 years running toward the next crisis, the next chart, the next person who needed someone to stay. She has always been in motion. She is not in motion right now. She steps into his space, not a collapse, not a surrender. A choice made with full information by a woman who has spent her entire career holding herself upright alone and has decided, deliberately, completely, with open eyes, to let someone stand beside her. She feels his hand come to rest at the small of her back, light enough to be a question. She does not step away. "I don't do this," she says. "I know," he says. "I don't rely on people." "I know that too." She looks up at him. "You're going to be a problem." "Almost certainly," he says. And this time he does smile. Small, private, real. The smile of a man who has not smiled in a long time and has not missed it until this exact moment. She lets herself have it. All of it. The warmth of being known and wanted by someone who has seen her at her most stripped down and her most capable, who watched her fight for a stranger's life and then watched her fight for her own, who never once flinched at either. The particular safety of being seen completely and chosen anyway. The city moves around them. Mary stays exactly where she is. She spent 11 years, saving other people's lives in that building behind her. Today, she walked out of it with her own intact. And the most dangerous man in the city is looking at her like she is the only still point in his entire world. She decides, quietly and finally, that she has earned this. Both of them have. If this story moved something in you, if you've ever had to be strong in a room that didn't see you, if you've ever swallowed something that deserved to be said out loud, if you've ever wanted someone to walk in and level the playing field, this one was for you. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one and I will say hello. Subscribe so you're here when the next story drops because the next one is going to hit even harder. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you there.